This program is made possible by a grant from Friends of the Library, Maryville, Tennessee.
How about learning to spell horseback? And I said, how? And he said, horseback. H-O-R-S-E, horse, B-A-C-K, back, horseback. And I said, what? See, these children were not dumb. They had learning disabilities of different kinds. And it was very important that we try to help them to achieve what they could and make good citizens. There were no library books in schools except for the high schools. And although we had no librarians, I helped to set up libraries in all of the schools.
This is Foothills Profile, featuring individuals whose lives have made a special contribution to the history of Blount County, Tennessee. This month, Lina Meganson talks with teacher and educator Elsie Burrell.
Today I'm talking with Ms. Elsie Burrell. She came to Blount County in 1942 as supervisor of Blount County schools. What was the picture of education like when you first came to Blount County, Ms. Burrell?
Oh dear, that's been a long time ago. There were 49 schools in Blount County at that time. 10 of them were one-room schools and 12 of them were two-room schools, scattered all over Blount County. So I had to find my way into all corners of Blount County at that time, from Calderwood to way below Friendsville, to the mountains, Cades Cove, and above Townsend. Teachers were hard to come by because it was war years, and many of our men had gone to serve in the Army and other phases of the armed services. And so we had many teachers that were just with high school education, or even maybe 1 year of college. And so it was a problem to help them to do a good job of teaching. And with so many different schools, I couldn't be there often. I did visit all of the schools as often as I could. But you see, I had charge of the library. I had a part-time librarian, but I had charge of ordering any books. I had charge of free textbooks, which only went to the 3rd grade at that time. But I was responsible for ordering and processing them and getting them out to the schools. I had no secretary. I was responsible for the whole thing. So it was a job, especially since I had not had any time for planning before school started. You see, I got my master's degree from the University of Tennessee on Friday and came out here on Monday to go to work. And schools were starting. So there was no preparation to be done. And as I went ahead with my work from then on, that month before school started was one of the most important months in the year for me, because I had to plan for the opening of school and that they had all their materials and things. The only thing they had were textbooks. And the first thing they asked me was, what workbooks do I use in this subject and that subject and something else? I remember how shocked I was when somebody said, what workbooks do you recommend for history and geography? And I looked at this person and I said, I don't. Because history and geography are about people, and you want to make them come alive for children. I don't see how you could use a workbook in that and make those things interesting. So my philosophy and the philosophy they'd been using wasn't exactly the same. But I tried to listen and understand and work with teachers. I had some feeling that she's a supervisor, and I didn't like that, because I was there to help teachers do a better job. And I found myself sitting down and telling stories to the children so that they and their teacher would feel easier when I came to school.
What are some evident steps toward the changes that you found in county education?
Well, in 10 years' time, we had only 2 one-room schools, and most of the 2-room schools were gone or consolidated or maybe increased because some of the one-room schools were with them. Anyway, we had only 11 schools that had less than 3 teachers. We found that in 10 years' time they had free textbooks and there were more books to be used, that they were beginning to use such things as tape recorders, and I don't mean tape recorders altogether, but maybe record players and film strip projectors. Yes, and we even got one movie projector, which I took around to the different elementary schools, because the only projectors that were in the schools were high school projectors that were used strictly to make money by the high schools, and no teaching films were used. And to me, there were many teaching films available, and they needed to know how to use those. And so I went around to the schools showing those movies. Another thing that I felt was so important were library books. There were no library books in schools except for the high schools. And although we had no librarians, I helped to set up libraries in all of the schools. When I retired in 1969, there were libraries in every school in Blount County, and at least a part-time librarian to help with those. You see, when we set them up, I used boys and girls to help set up these little libraries in their schools. And then they helped to take care of them because they had helped to process them. There were lots of jobs to be done. I felt that there was a need of science in the schools, not just high schools. Nothing was done in the grades. We started by outdoor education because our world is full of things that we can teach about science. And we were one of the first in the state of Tennessee to have school camps where we took boys and girls out for a week out to Montvale or to Laurel Lake and spent a week. I remember the first teacher said, "What'll I do with children for a whole week out there?" And she planned so much to do that she didn't get through half of it, but it was a very wonderful experience. And it's something that those people who lived through that have never forgotten. I meet adults today who say, "You remember when we went to Montvale?" or "Do you remember when we went to Laurel Lake?" And they discuss some of the things. I'll always remember one boy. The teacher said, "I don't think I can take him with me to Montvale. He is such a problem. I don't think there's any way I can take him." And his mother came and begged for her to take him. And she took him with the understanding that he was to behave himself, that he was to be a part of the group, and he became one of the best campers she had. But the thing that I think we felt was the most important, the last night of camp, they always had a kind of an evaluation. And she said, "Do some of you boys and girls want to tell what camp has meant to you?" And this boy was the first one to speak up. And he said, "Yes, I found Jesus on the quiet trail." What if he hadn't come?
That's a beautiful experience. Several Blount County historical landmarks that come to mind in education are the Sam Houston Schoolhouse, Porter Academy, and even the earlier schools that were located in Cades Cove. Do you have some remembrances of the history of those areas?
Oh, yes. Sam Houston Schoolhouse brings a lot of memories to me because you see, later I was asked to be on the board for Sam Houston Schoolhouse. The schoolhouse was condemned because, well, it was falling down. And so we had to plan how could we get this schoolhouse restored. And it took an awful lot of work to get it done. And after it was done, one of the board members on the Historical Association came by one day, and she went down to the schoolhouse and she asked somebody that was on duty that day something about it, and they couldn't answer. And she went back and said that we had rebuilt that schoolhouse and there wasn't a stick of the original schoolhouse in it and it was a fake. She told the board that and told them that she was against continuing support, state support for it. If you can imagine what happened, I went on a warpath. One of the reporters for the News Sentinel was on the board, and he called me that night after the board meeting and said, "Do you know what happened at the board meeting today?" I said, "No, I don't." And he told me. I said, "She can't do that to us." I said, "This is a state-owned property and it has to be supported by the state." I said, "She can't do that." He says, "What are you going to say about it?" I said, "You tell them we'll fight it." And so we did. We got it restored to the state responsibility. And since then, with the support of the people of the community. You see, before that time, when I first went on the board, it was what we call a self-sustaining board, I guess you would call it, because the first board was appointed by the governor. And then those 5 people, if one of them left, then the other 4 selected somebody to take that one place. And they stayed on as long as they wanted to. I said, I don't think this is any way to run this board because I think we ought to have new blood in here. I think we ought to have new people in. We ought to get more support from the community. And so to get this done, we had to have a change in our legislature. Our legislator had to get this changed before we could ask people to come in as an organization, an association, and then elect a board. And this is the way I felt it should be run. And so, but finally we got it changed. We got a good working association and a board of 15 and brought in a lot of new people that had good ideas, and it's just been going good. You see, this was a historical spot, probably one of the most important historical spots as a nation that we had in our county, and we had to hold it because Sam Houston is nationally known. Without Sam Houston, there wouldn't have been a Texas. But when I came to Blount County, there was only one school in Cades Cove, and that was at the Cable Cemetery, right in front of the Cable Cemetery. It was a little one-room school. And the last year they had school there, they had, I believe, 15 children, and 6 of them were 8th graders. So that, and there were no first graders coming in the next year. So that left too few children to continue the school, and they were bused out to Townsend. Before that time, there had been 2 schools down on Parsons Branch, which is a part of the lower part of Cades Cove.
Many physical changes have taken place in the schools, such as this one we're in now, the Union Elementary School, compared to the modern schools of today. Do you have some observations in regard to the changes?
Well, suppose we think about this spot here at Union. When I first came here, it was a weatherboarded school. I think they had, let me think, how many teachers did they have that year? I think it might be interesting because this school is one in transition. Union School at that time had 4 teachers. It was a little 4-teacher school. They had organized a lunchroom, which they had in a basement. And it was directly under one of the classrooms. And the only way into that or out of it was through a steep one-way stairway. And every time I came to that school, I was almost sick at night when I went home, thinking about what if that room above that cafeteria caught on fire? Because you see, the floors were oiled to keep down the dust, and they had coal stoves in each room. And I couldn't keep from thinking, what if a fire got out in that school and those children were down there in that lunchroom? They would be caught like rats in a trap. So this school that we're in today is what they call the old Union School, but it is a modern school in comparison with that, because in this school they had about 10 teachers, and they had a little library and an auditorium, gymnasium, and it's modern in terms of that school. But then they decided that this was too close to the other schools, and the population had changed. You see, a changing population changes where we have schools and what kind of schools we have. And this particular place was too close to the city schools to maintain its enrollment. And so they decided that this would be an ideal place for a material center. I think that too is an interesting phase as we think of what's happened to the schools that have been disbanded. We have some of our small schools that have been disbanded that have become community centers, and they are wonderful. You take that little Happy Valley school way up there in the mountains, and they have one of the best community centers you can find. You go down Friendsville Way, and you have the little schoolhouse that was Miser Station, and it too is a community center. You go out toward Porter, and you have Oakview, a very excellent community center. You go out toward the Airport Highway, and you have Kit Carson, which is just a tops community center, and has also been a center for daycare for children. So a number of these places are being used and not abused. Prospect has become a private school that is quite interesting. So we have many uses of them. It's quite good. I was just out at Montvale, one of our new schools. We have 2 new elementary schools that are fantastic, Middle Settlements and Montvale. And they too provide many things that the schools like this couldn't have provided because we didn't have the facilities for them. And it's just great to see children having an opportunity of this type that they didn't have before.
What changes have taken place in the high schools?
Well, you know, when I first came here, there were 6 high schools. They all had elementary schools with them. Some of them had only 6 to 8 teachers in high school, which meant that they had only an opportunity to give boys and girls the basic requirements and nothing extra. High schools today, maybe some people were opposed to the consolidation, but many of those people have said to me since then, but our children wouldn't have had the opportunities that they have today because our new consolidated high schools have so many more opportunities for boys and girls to learn things that they couldn't learn in the old high schools because we didn't have enough teachers to provide those things, and teachers were not trained to do that. So the high school situation has really changed and is changing constantly, providing more occupational opportunities for boys and girls, because we know that all boys and girls are not going to college, even if some high schools still say that their children are all going to college. There is no way that all children will get a college education, because some of them need something else, and some of them have so much ability in other areas that they need an opportunity for training in those areas.
You continue to circulate in the educational community life of Blount County. What are some of the things that you're presently enjoying in sponsoring with the school children?
Yes, I'll always enjoy school children, I think. I just worked with a group of 90 children yesterday in a little one-room school up in the mountains. This is not in Blount County, but many of our Blount County children go up there. I have had 100 little first graders up there. I've had 100 little third graders up there in that little schoolhouse called Little Greenbrier. But many children go up there for a day where we try to teach them about what school used to be like a long time ago. I think we've lost sight of the fact that there were some good things in the old schools and some good things that children need to know about. And so I'm trying to do that. I work with children out on the trails many times, especially at Montvale, going out on the trails with them to teach them about the out of doors. I work with them in their own schools sometimes, either in storytelling or in history or in some other phase that teachers ask me to help with. Right now I'm involved in the Just Say No program with some of our children. I'll be helping 2 or 3 or maybe more schools to help them understand what the Just Say No program is to alcohol and drug abuse. This will be for children in the 4th and 5th grade, because I've been amazed at the fact that many of these children are directly involved in drug and alcohol.
There's one of particular interest that I'd like you to share, and that's on the spelling bee, such as up at the Little Greenbrier Schoolhouse when you do your talks there.
Well, you see, when I was born in a log cabin in Illinois, my father was 85 years old. So his world was an entirely different world from mine. And he said to me one day, "I think you ought to learn to spell like I do." Because he had learned to spell from the old Webster's blueback speller. And I said, "How?" And he said, "Well, you like to go out to your grandpa's and spell horseback. How about learn to spell horseback?" And I said, "How?" And he said, "Horseback. H-O-R-S-E, horse, B-A-C-K, back, horseback." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Horseback. H-O-R-S-E, horse, B-A-C-K, back, horseback." Well, I remember that, and when I first took a Blount County group of children to Little Greenbrier, and the teacher asked me for a spelling bee, I thought, a spelling bee? I don't think kids today would like a spelling bee. And then I remembered my father teaching me that, and I thought, maybe it could be fun. And so I took an old blueback speller, and I made me a chart, and I showed them how boys and girls learn to spell from the 1st grade through the 8th out of one book. And it has become quite an interesting experience. In fact, children scream and holler so for the girls or the boy to win. at the end of the spelling bee that you could hear them, I'm sure, a half mile away. I do this with children I do it with children and adults every Tuesday during the summer because I'm a volunteer in the park. And every time a group of children want to go up there during the school year. And I also do it out in the schools sometimes.
Are there some special memories of highlights in education that you feel personally either gratified or disappointed about in the education since you've been in this county?
Well, I think I couldn't leave out the feeling of satisfaction that I had for helping those boys and girls who needed some kind of special help. I feel that every child in a school system or in a community has a right to an education on his own level. He has the right to expect that he will be taught to do the best he can, whatever it may be. And with that philosophy, I started special education, and I was called everything but a lady at the beginning of that. No, my child is not dumb. He cannot be in special education. No, my child cannot be in special education. One man went so far as to say, I'm going to bring my shotgun and shoot you. I said, that wouldn't help your granddaughter any. And all we're interested in is helping her to adjust to an easier way of school. But it was hard sometimes. But we had a loyal group of teachers that were willing to take training and learn how to teach these boys and girls. And it's a great satisfaction when I meet one of them now and they tell me about their work. And some of them are on the same job that they got job training from our vocational training center, which was a part of our program. We set up a training program for special education boys and girls from the time they started school until they finished high school or at that high school age. Porter High School was the first high school in our area to give high school certificates to boys and girls who were in special education. And some of those boys and girls are in the same job that they were when they finished. And some of those have made good homes, and I've followed them through. They are making excellent homes, and their children. One parent called me not long ago and said, do you know my son is graduating from high school this year? I'm so proud of him, and he's going to college next year. See, these children were not dumb. They had learning disabilities of different kinds. And it was very important that we try to help them to achieve what they could and make good citizens. I remember this one family where there was a lot of children. And this, we had 3 or 4 of their children in special class. And he said, the father said, you can't work my kids and not give them minimum wage. We were trying to teach them how to work through our vocational training center. But I remember when those boys first got their when they first had to pay tax, and they came and asked me, would I help them figure out their tax? They were so proud of the fact that they had made enough money that they had to pay a little tax or were supposed to report it. So there are a lot of things like that that come to my mind as I think about accomplishments. There were many things I'd like to have done I didn't do, but you're limited.
Thank you, Ms. Burrell, for your continuing support in the education of Blount County and what you've offered in sharing with us today your memories and the history of Blount County education.
Foothills Profile, featuring individuals whose lives have made a special contribution to the history of Blount County, Tennessee. This month's profile has featured teacher and educator Elsie Burrell. This has been a production of WFBA Television, Alcoa. This program has been made possible by a grant from Friends of the Library, Maryville, Tennessee. This program is made possible by a grant from Friends of the Library, Maryville, Tennessee.